Without doubt, the most famous ship to fly the Australian White Ensign, HMAS Melbourne, was laid down in April 1943 as HMS Majestic. With the ending of World War II, all construction work stopped as the British Royal Navy no longer needed another aircraft carrier. The arrival of carrier-based jet aircraft and new British inventions in carrier design, such as the angled flight deck, steam catapult and mirror landing system, meant that the ship had to be redesigned to incorporate these latest advances in technology. This delayed the completion of the Melbourne, and she was finally accepted into the RAN service on the 8th of November 1955. With her arrival in Australian waters in 1956, the HMAS Melbourne became the flagship of the Royal Australian Navy, an honour she would hold for the next 26 years. HMAS Melbourne carried British-built Fairey Gannets and Sea Venoms, which were used to form 816, 817 and 808 squadrons. Sycamore helicopters performed search and rescue operations until the arrival of the Wessex in the early 60s. The Wessex provided the first anti-submarine warfare helicopter operations from the Melbourne and continued in a search and rescue role until 1982. The operation of large, fast warships has always been a dangerous business, and this was brought home to the Australian public in 1964 when the Melbourne and HMAS Voyager collided, with the loss of the destroyer and 82 of its crew. And again in 1967 when the Melbourne and the USS Frankie Evans collided, with the loss of 72 American sailors. Despite the accidents with the Voyager and Frankie Evans, which were not the fault of the Melbourne, she proved to be one of the safest ships operated by the RAN. In 27 years service, only 4 crew were lost. All were air crew. In 1967, the Melbourne's air group of Gannets and Sea Venoms were replaced by Trackers and Skyhawks. These, along with the later Sea Kings, served on board HMAS Melbourne for the next 15 years, showing the Australian flag on all the world's great oceans. In June 1982, the great but aging fleet flagship was decommissioned and lay mothballed, while a possible replacement was debated. The aircraft carrier role was ultimately replaced by fast helicopter-carrying FFG frigates. In April 1985, the Melbourne sailed out through Sydney Heads for the last time, under tow, for a breaker's yard in China. The de Havilland Sea Venom was the Royal Australian Navy's first jet-powered fighter and the first all-weather fighter in the Australian Defence Forces. Night intercept operations were now possible due to modern aircraft instrumentation and the AI-17 radar, which was very sophisticated for an aircraft of the period. For the first time, an observer worked as a team, with the fighter pilot to guide him to the target at night or in heavy cloud using the AI-17 radar. Under these conditions, the pilot had to have absolute faith in the radar skills of his observer. A total of 39 Sea Venoms were bought in 1956 to serve with 805 and 808 squadrons aboard HMAS Melbourne. They also served in 724 Squadron in the training role at HMAS Albatross in Nowra.
Now all is ready for the cartridge-fired startup. This method of starting is necessary for shipboard operations where there is no room for the bulky electrical starting devices normally used. Again, the folded wings are a great space saver in the carrier's hangars.
Unusually for a night interceptor, this new jet fighter had a fuselage which was built from wood. The Sea Venom was solid and pleasant in its handling characteristics, with a relatively good safety record, although 11 were ditched or lost in crashes during the years it was in service with the RAN.
It's stick forward, full throttle, fire. Fired from 1,500 feet in batches of 8, the rockets are right on target. Now that the rockets have done their job, they go in with cannons. From the 4 guns in the wings, over 3,000 high-explosive shells per minute pepper the make-believe enemy.
The Sea Venom's jet engine was far less responsive than engines of propeller-driven aircraft previously flown by the RAN. Pilots who flew Sea Venoms therefore had to radically change their flying procedures when landing on a carrier. The moment the wheels touched down on the deck, they went to full throttle. Otherwise, if they missed the last arrestor wire on the carrier's deck, they wouldn't have had enough time to throttle the engine to full power to take off again. It took many practice landings at HMAS Albatross before a Navy pilot was ready to land a Sea Venom on the deck of the aircraft carrier HMAS Melbourne. The Sea Venom soldiered on until 1967, when it was replaced by the Skyhawk.
Back in the old piston engine days, notably the era of the Sea Fury, deck landing was an art, somewhat akin to ballet dancing. Done well, it was breathtaking. But so frequently it wasn't done well, it was done badly. And the accident statistics we got would horrify people today. It was in this context in 1950 that I had a go at solving the problem. Technically, there wasn't much difficulty, but the real problem lay in convincing both the pilots and the Admiralty authorities that a new system was necessary. There's a nice little story about trying to convince Admiralty authority. There was a large model of an aircraft carrier in the office, so we invited the secretary to loan us the mirror from our handbag and draw a line on it with her lipstick. We propped up the mirror against the island on the model and put a torch on the flight deck pointing towards the mirror. We then asked her to walk towards the carrier, keeping the reflection of the torch bulb in line with the lipstick line. Being an excellent secretary, she carried this out to perfection, moving steadily across the room, stooping more and more until she came to rest in the landing area. This convinced Admiralty authority. That left the pilots. Trials soon took place, however, and the pilots began to see the new system really worked.
The mirror landing system presents the approaching pilot with a visual image of his plane's position in relation to the flight deck in all weather and at night. This is a much faster and more accurate method than with a landing signal officer or batman signaling to an incoming aircraft with his pair of colored paddles or lighted wands at night.
In fact, when it was introduced together with the angled deck, it produced an absolutely dramatic reduction in the accident rate. For every 18 accidents that we used to have, we now had only 1.
And on the glide path, approaching minimums, look ahead to the ball.
Keep that orange ball in the middle. Stand next spot. Keep that nose up.
In 1956, the RAN acquired 36 Fairey Gannets for search and anti-submarine roles. 23 were transported to Australia on HMAS Melbourne when it first sailed out from the UK, and the remainder arrived by sea shortly afterwards. Gannets had two turboprop engines with counter-rotating propellers rotating about a central shaft, giving the plane a single engine configuration. Each engine could be controlled independently of the other. One was normally shut down for extended single-engine cruising. This unusual arrangement gave the anti-submarine aircraft the advantages of two engines with the size of a single-engine aircraft. Submarine operators sat behind the Gannet's pilot in separate cockpits. The rather portly Gannet could carry 2 homing torpedoes in its bomb bay and 16 rockets under its wings. The Gannet served with 816 and 817 squadrons until 1967, when they were replaced by the Tracker. Despite its bulky appearance, the Gannet was a smooth-flying, maneuverable machine, and its crews were sentimentally attached to their ungainly-looking aircraft. The Westland Wessex was the Royal Australian Navy's first hunter-killer anti-submarine helicopter, capable of flying night or day in any weather. 27 of these American-designed but British-built aircraft were purchased from the Westland Company in 1962. They saw service on board HMAS Melbourne in an anti-submarine role and as search and rescue helicopters. The Wessex, with its dipping sonar and homing torpedoes, opened a new era in anti-submarine warfare operations with the fleet by providing random active and passive submarine detection capabilities over a wider area, thus creating greater problems for enemy submarines to contend with. In 1968, 23 of the helicopters were updated to the Mark 31B configuration, fitted with improved engines, new sonar and communications equipment, which extended their service life.
Your heading for the new position is 215.
Roger.
Sounds like a helo transmission.
Affirmative, sir. EQS 30 transmissions north.
Mike 4, this is 825. Contact. Possible submarine. Bearing 180, range 1,000 yards. Confidence high.
G, sir. Kilo 25 is hot, 180, 1,000 yards.
Base course 300.
8 to 5, roger.
Your heading for the new position is 215.
Roger, raise the ball.
Roger, raising the ball.
On completion, operate not above 1,000, and your salvage time 13:30 local. Up 10 feet.
The Wessex featured in numerous rescues, support during the Cyclone Tracy operations in Darwin, Army support roles, and many other day and night operations. After much faithful service as the workhorse of the fleet, the Wessex was finally retired on the 31st of December, 1989.
That fear, which I put down as adrenaline, fear, works for you. It doesn't work against you, and one never wants to be afraid of fear in the air.
On July the 17th, Lieutenant Commander Graham King survived a mid-air collision and this crash landing at the Naval Air Station Nowra.
It was the first accident that I've had in 18 years of flying.
From the first days of naval aviation, the small, heaving deck of an aircraft carrier has been an adrenaline-filled challenge for a pilot to land on. During the Second World War, up to 3/4 of all carrier aircraft losses were takeoff or landing accidents. Coupled with combat losses, the lifespan of a carrier pilot could be very short, sometimes only a matter of weeks. With the introduction of new safety devices, such as the mirror landing system to more accurately guide incoming aircraft, and the angled flight deck, which enables aircraft to land while other planes are still on deck, the incidence of carrier accidents has dropped dramatically, although the life of a birdie is still not a job for the faint-hearted.
It has been stated that the heartbeat of a pilot on finals for a carrier approach is higher than a guy in actual combat. Now, I find that fairly hard to believe, but really, you know, that was a statement made by aviation medicine doctors. And perhaps in the night environment, definitely I believe that is the case.
The Navy introduced the Sea King helicopter in 1974 to upgrade the anti-submarine warfare capability of the fleet with a helicopter that had a greater range, payload and endurance than the existing Wessex helicopter.
Melbourne, this is Sea King lead. Hot. Sonar contact 074, 2460. Classified enemy submarine, over.
Sea King leader 1, Sea King 2. I have you on radar. Jump at 270, 6,000 yards to investigate datum. Over.
With its radar, powerful dipping sonar and sophisticated electronics, the Sea King was a giant step forward in defending the Australian fleet.
As an aircraft itself, the Sea King has got some very sophisticated systems, which does make it a pleasure to fly.
Sea King lead to drop now, over.
The power provided by its two 1,500 horsepower Rolls-Royce gas turbine engines gives it additional safety, engine reliability and lifting power, with the capability of carrying up to 4 air-launched homing torpedoes or depth charges. When the anti-submarine warfare equipment is removed, the Sea King becomes a powerful utility aircraft. Very heavy slung cargo loads up to nearly 3 tons are often carried, and its large internal space gives it the capacity to carry up to 21 persons in the rear cabin, making it very useful for troop carrying or providing evacuation services. The Sea King is unique in its ability to retrieve submarine-launched practice torpedoes. Great pilot skill and patience is required in this maneuver. The boat-shaped hull of the Sea King enables it to make an emergency landing at sea, although taking off again is another matter. The Sea King has endeared itself to all its aircrew with a reputation as a solid, forgiving helicopter with lots of space for its crew and passengers.
Echo 3, contact Alpha, possible submarine, 340 at 15.
Roger 3. Mike 4, this is 843, possible submarine contact 340-15, investigating.
In 1967, 14 Grumman trackers were ordered as anti-submarine aircraft, replacing the Fairey Gannet. Although slower than the turboprop aircraft it replaced, the piston engine tracker could carry 3 times the weapon load and had twice the endurance of the Gannet.
Pull back up.
Fire. Fuel. Gas is not to be ditched. Gas is not to be ditched.
Grumman trackers had an enviable safety record. Only one tracker was lost on operations in the 17 years it served the Royal Australian Navy, although 10 were destroyed in a hangar fire in 1976. In March 1977, 16 replacement trackers were bought from the US Navy. Although second-hand, the replacement aircraft were the later G model, which had improved mission equipment.
The tracker was originally designed as an anti-submarine aircraft. She's old, but still one of the best in the business.
The tracker's electronics were quite advanced for its time. With its surface search radar, magnetic anomaly detector, and both active and passive sonar buoys, the tracker was a potent anti-submarine weapon system and remained in service with the RAN until August 1984, continuing to operate from HMAS Albatross in Nowra after HMAS Melbourne was decommissioned in 1982.
Okay, you're on. Stand by. Fire.
The unmistakable sound of the tracker's 2 radial engines will always be nostalgically remembered by all that have flown the Stoof.
This is Delta Lima.
Target now left 11 o'clock. Lead offside. 2 offside. 3 offside.
The McDonnell Douglas A4 Skyhawk entered service with the Royal Australian Navy in 1967. These small, rugged, transonic aircraft served in a fleet defence and fighter bomber role with 805 Squadron on HMAS Melbourne after the aircraft carrier had been modified to handle these newer, faster jets.
Hatches closed and locked. Hydraulics, lights out. Head knocker up. Controls check.
They also served with 724 Squadron at HMAS Albatross at Nowra in New South Wales, which provided the A4 training facilities. The Skyhawk's load-carrying ability was amazing. It could lift more than 1.5 times its own weight in weapons and fuel. Also, Navy Skyhawks were the first Australian aircraft to have an air-to-air refueling capability, which allowed it to operate at extreme ranges from the carrier.
090, 120 miles.
A total of 20 Skyhawks were operated by the Fleet Air Arm, comprising 16 single-seaters and 4 TA-4G dual-seat trainers, although only the single-seaters could operate from HMAS Melbourne. With the decommissioning of HMAS Melbourne, the 10 surviving Skyhawks were sold to the New Zealand Air Force in 1984 and are still flying today. Although the A4 has been described as a flying brick, it is a highly maneuverable aircraft which has surprised many an opponent and has banged a few unwary passengers' heads against the canopy during high-speed maneuvers in the two-seat trainers.
Target destroyed. Charlie 23 double leader returning to home plate.
The Aerospatiale Squirrel was acquired in 1984 to replace the UH-1B Iroquois helicopter and has proved to be one of the Navy's most versatile aircraft. Originally intended for training duties, the Squirrel has also been employed in search and rescue, medical evacuations, and light utility roles. In 1985, they were embarked on the FFG frigates as an interim helicopter until the arrival of the Sikorsky Seahawks. The Squirrel's small size and lightweight composite airframe makes it difficult to be detected by many radar systems. Its abilities are also enhanced by its low visibility paint, satellite navigation system, radar warning receiver, thermal imaging equipment and night vision goggles for the pilot. The Squirrel's major drawback at sea is its use of skids instead of wheels to land on, and the small cargo payload it can carry. By comparison, the Seahawk's fuel load is greater than the Squirrel's total weight. Even so, this stopgap aircraft has been used very effectively at sea by many enthusiastic crews.
The Squirrel is a small single-engine aircraft. It hasn't got wheels and it isn't designed to fly off the back of a ship. The Navy's been doing it successfully for many years now and it's performed admirably well.
I enjoy flying the Squirrel at the moment. It's compared to the Seahawk, it's a relatively simple aircraft and a small crew and a small crew in the hangar, the maintainers, so we all get on quite well, which is good.
In 1990, 3 Squirrels were deployed on board the Navy frigates in the Red Sea in support of the UN sanctions against Iraq. With a machine gun mounted in the cabin, the Squirrels were used to provide top cover for the frigate's boarding parties as part of the UN operations in the Gulf of Aqaba. Its lightweight and highly responsive controls can make the Squirrel a real handful in trying weather conditions. However, once mastered, it is a very maneuverable machine. It's lovingly referred to as the battle budgie. Following the decommissioning of the aircraft carrier HMAS Melbourne, the RAN had lost its airborne anti-submarine warfare force. Hence, with the arrival of the FFG guided missile frigates into the fleet, new anti-submarine helicopters were acquired for the Royal Australian Navy. 16 of these Sikorsky S-70B-2 Seahawk helicopters were purchased, with deliveries beginning in 1988. The first 8 were built in the USA, with the remainder assembled by Aerospace Technologies of Australia in Avalon, Victoria. The Seahawk has twin engines, unparalleled survivability and crash-tolerance features. It has proved to be the ideal helicopter for airborne maritime operations. As the smoothest helicopter in the Navy inventory, cruising at 140 knots with comfortable seats and excellent air conditioning, it has endeared itself to all who fly in it. As well as anti-submarine warfare, the aircraft can be used in surface surveillance and over-the-horizon targeting roles for surface and submarine-launched Harpoon missiles. While normally only one Seahawk is embarked on each FFG in peacetime, the FFGs have been designed to carry 2 Seahawks, which can be embarked for major exercises, or, if hostilities require, the additional capability. At night, or in bad weather, a recovery system is used to guide the 9-ton Seahawk onto the small, heaving deck of an FFG. Crew training is conducted here at HMAS Albatross in a state-of-the-art full-mission simulator, which can simulate the worst conditions the crew will ever have to contend with. The aircrew are also trained to use the complex radar, anti-submarine warfare equipment and tactical data systems fitted in the Seahawk. These systems can transfer tactical information to other ships and aircraft to provide accurate early warning of any possible threats to the fleet, thus making the Seahawk invaluable as the eyes and ears of the fleet.